how did you and Billy Billingham end up getting taken hostage?
Yeah, that's quite a bizarre one, actually. That was fairly low key, and was kept right off the grid, for obvious reasons. And it wasn't until Billy mentioned it really on Who Dares Wins, when he was doing escape and evasion, and a capture type scenario on there, and he actually alluded to the fact that he'd actually been captured. So then the story came out, and there's Billy's side of it and there's my side of it. Bear in mind that we're in the same vehicle, captured at the same time, slightly different variants, and and I've had a chat about Billy, to Billy about this, and it's funny how different people's memories remember things slightly different. So for me, it wasn't a big drama. I'd just come back from Northern Ireland doing undercover work for 2 years. So I knew how to give a good cover story. So when we set this meeting up between two generals, which is a Muslim general, General Dadakovich, who's quite high up, pretty fearsome individual, to be quite frank, because he was in charge of 5 corps who were the sort of B Hatch area, which is the north west of the country, and it was an enclave, really, a Muslim enclave that had withstood all the Serb attacks on it, so held out. So good on him, quite a hardcore individual, and a Serb general, and it was all about troop movement. It wasn't anything special. It was just to get these two generals together so that they can decide, where troops are going to be when the ceasefire came in. So not a big issue, just get your heads together, bang your heads together and get a grip, So me and Billy went down there the day before just to recce the area, as you do. Time spent on recce is very seldom wasted, as we say. Went down there for the recce, day before. Went down the Serb front lines and had a quick chat with them, had a coffee, Slivovich, and said, listen, we'll see you again. And they all seemed quite friendly. Bear in mind that we didn't look like UN. One thing that we never ever did, even though we came under the UN banner, we certainly never ever looked and operated in the same way as the UN did, because we actually wanted to get the job done. Whereas when you're the UN, your hands are tied somewhat with UN protocol. We were having nothing to do with that, which actually really annoyed most of the UN. Because they'd have their fancy briefings and we'd ignore it and say, listen, we're off. We'll tell you about it later on. So when we went down there, they actually thought we were quite strange looking, because we had no UN. But we turned up, me and Billy turned up there. He's got a good sense of humour. I've got a good sense of humour. And we had a good crack, really. Non-threatening. We both had pistols, but we didn't carry longs down there, because carrying a long weapon can be construed as being quite aggressive. So we went down there. We're here in peace. So had a good chat with them. Decided that tomorrow, not a problem at all. So me and Billy then set the meeting up with 2 other lads. There was 4 of us in our little team. Set the meeting up, and then me and Billy said, "Listen, let's go down and have another chat with the Serbs, as you do." And I pride myself on being good with situational awareness. It kept me alive quite well over in Belfast for nearly 2 years, but unfortunately, it went out the window, mainly because I was with someone else. I was with Billy. So you tend to rely on each other. Just get on with it. And we went down to the front line, and it was funny, because walking down there, it just seemed as if it was slightly different. It wasn't the same atmosphere. And what we totally forgot is, because they'd brought the general up, the Serb general who was now in the meeting, they'd also brought their decent troops up. And they'd completely changed. So these people we never met the day before. So when Mr. Rag and Bone turns up, scruffy hair, longish hair, certainly didn't look like normal squaddies or normal military people, with just a pistol. No UN insignia, no berries, no body armor, none of that sort of pants. We think we spooked them. to be quite frank, and they reared on us straight away. You know, eight of these served with a variant of the AK-47. It's not an AK, but it's pretty similar, the old Yugoslavian version of it, and they pointed the weapons and literally took us prisoner. And not a lot we could have done about it. You know, you can't fight your way. You know, you can't take a pistol to an AK-47 shootout, like, you know, and expect to get away with it. So we accepted the fact that, you know, we'd got this wrong, badly wrong. They took us into a little farm building next to a road, gave us a quick tactical questioning. And one of the guys who was doing there was a captain there, a major, and he spoke absolutely perfect English. So he was doing the talking, and then for some reason he made a phone call and decided that the two of us had to be then taken 45 minutes down the road to a place called Prijedor, which is quite a big city, but it was renowned for having a army base there where they used to take Muslim prisoners, and the Muslim prisoners, unfortunately, were starved and then disappeared or executed. So quite a notorious place, if that makes sense. But again, at no stage did we, you know, have any fears about, you know, what was going on, because, you know, we're trusting people. Just get on with it, like, you know. So they put us in the vehicle. Me and Billy got put in the back. They'd obviously disarmed us, took our spare magazines off us. We had 6 Sauer pistols, 4 spare 20-round magazines. They took them off us. People will come on there and say, 20-round magazine, we have the extended magazines, if that makes sense. So yes, you can get 20. It looks as if, when you look at it, it looks as if your magazine's falling out of your pistol, because about that much of it sticks out the end, out the bottom. And I was forever being tapped on, excuse me, mate, but your magazine's coming off. No, it isn't. It's 20 round. So we, you know, they took them off us, took our maps off us, compass, and notebooks. But everything was sterile. There was nothing on there to say that we were SAS or whatever, like, you know, which I think quite annoyed them. The only thing that we did have, we had UN ID cards, and Billy's number was 011, mine was 02, so the numbers were very, very similar. Bear in mind that Billy had been out there about 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks before me, because I was away on a course, and then I sort of joined the 3-man team to bring it up to the 4-man that we normally operate with. So they then decided that we were going to be driven. So 45-minute drive, back seat of the vehicle. Me and Billy were sort of chatting, as you do, chatting away, blah, 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 blah. And actually seeing a lot of troop movement. So we were actually getting more from this than what they were getting out of us, because they were getting nothing from us at all, like, you know. And we were seeing all their troop movement, and, you know, this is great, fantastic, you know. But you're memorising it as you do and cracking on. But because we were whispering, the major who was driving the vehicle said something to this other guy, who then span round on his seat. You know, for a big lad, he span round pretty quickly to kneel on the front seat, and then he cocked his weapon, or made his weapon ready, i.e., put a round in the chamber. Now, ordinarily, you know, you would have thought that was quite a frightening experience, but me and Billy looked at each other, and I don't know if it is maybe nervousness or whatever, but we started laughing. And the reason being is, if we'd known that he hadn't had a round up in his chamber, we could have jumped him beforehand. We automatically assume that if you're on the front line, most people, normal people, would have a round in the chamber, so you're good to go. So all you do is you pull the trigger and yahoo. But he didn't have a round in the chamber, and that, you know, confused us somewhat. And for professionalism, we were like, that, hold on, that, not very professional. So we had a sort of a quick burst of laughter. And that really annoyed this guy somewhat, because his so-called intimidation wasn't working. Anyway, he sat back down, obviously frustrated. We got the message that, you know, stop talking, because that's why he spun around in the first place. which we did do. We then pulled up into this military camp, then realised where it was, and then they took us into quite a long hut for more interrogation. Now I got dragged in first. I don't know why I got dragged in first, and I just, to be honest, I just acted the dummy and said, "Listen, mate, I've only been here 2 weeks," which I had done. I'd only been there 2 weeks because whereas Billy had been there for 5 weeks, been there for 2 weeks, and I said, "Listen, mate, all I'm just a driver. I know nothing." You know, and I played on that for the whole hour, and you could see the major getting really frustrated. No, driver, no, nothing. You know, couldn't get anything out of me, so threw me out in disgust, really, into the corridor. And the guy that we laughed at took great pleasure from then on in giving me a bit of a hard time. So anyway, Billy then gets dragged in, obviously for the same interrogation. But poor old Billy made the mistake of trying to speak Serbo-Croat because Billy had been on a 6-week Serbo-Croat course prior to Bosnia. And we sent about 10 people on it just so that we had people within the squadron that could communicate in Serbo-Croat as such. We all had our own interrogators anyway, but it's always nice to understand a bit of a language. I was on a different course, I never got that bit, so I couldn't play on that. So Billy, now they put 2 and 2 together and just thought, Billy must be he must be the switched on one, and Mr. Thicky driver outside must be the idiot, like, you know. So after an hour, Billy came out. 5 minutes, we were in the corridor. Couldn't really communicate because we were quite a way apart. Billy then gets dragged back in again. And this went on then for 5 or 6 times, Billy getting dragged in, and I was just left to, you know, the sadistic sort of treatment of this guy that we'd laughed at, who was now taking great pleasure in either kicking me in the shins, or he had a bayonet that he took pleasure in digging into the side of you, threatening normal sort of tactics that you would expect, intimidation, if that makes sense. Just get on with it, like, you know. And again, wasn't a drama, because you expect that, you know, if you're captured by troops, you expect to get a much harder time than what we were actually getting, if that makes sense. So not playing down on it, but, you know, it's expected. You know, it's part of your job. Just get on with it, like, you know. So anyway, after about the 4th, 5th, 6th time or whatever it was, so they actually put us fairly close together. So me and Billy were, you know, we could actually speak to each other in the corridor, if that makes sense. And Billy leant over and said, "Mick, fucking hell, mate, what did you tell them?" I went, "Well, sorry, mate, I just said I'm the driver." He went, yeah, but I'm the driver." So we call it in you know, British humour, snooze you lose, mate. You know, I got in there first and said it, and that was my cover story, and it kept me below the radar, because they just thought Mr. Thicky, who's he, like, you know, and they concentrated on poor old Billy, if that makes sense. So in the meantime, the other 2 lads had realised that we'd been captured. You had to walk past a normal British UN warrior vehicle of the light infantry who were manning it. And we'd sort of slapped on the side of the vehicle and say, "Listen, lads, we're just going to have a quick chat with the Serbs." They sort of give us a funny look, thinking, "Who the hell are these 2 nutters?" And because we never came back, they just put 2 and 2 together and thought, yeah, they must have been captured. So they then got on to the 2 lads in the meeting, who got on a sat phone to General Smith, who was the general down in Sarajevo, and they explained it all to him. Fantastic response. He said, "Listen, not a drama. Go and give a sat phone to the Serbian general. Tell him that, you know, we know that the Serbs have got our 2 people. If they're not returned, then the Serbian general was going to be arrested and taken to Bihać." And he absolutely, the thought of that, he pooped his pants, to be honest, because, you know, a Serb general going behind the Muslim lines, didn't appeal to him. So anyway, so he's straight on the sat phone, got us released. So about an hour later, we got all our weapons, everything back, sort of pat on the head, yeah, and off we went, like, you know. And me and Billy were walking back towards our lines because we're in no man. It was about a 2 kilometre no man's land, and right in the middle was where we had the meeting with the generals, which is where the UN warrior vehicles were, which were manned by British. And so me and Billy were walking back, just having a chat. You know, flipping out. That was a bit surreal. You know, doesn't normally happen every day. Yeah, blah blah blah. And we said, listen, you know, it's fairly low key. So the only people that knew about it was obviously me and Billy, the other two lads in the patrol, General Smith and the OC, officer commanding B Squadron, and the B Squadron Sergeant Major. And that is about it. They're the only people that knew about it. So all of the rest of the squadron, who were scattered all over Bosnia, it never really came to light because there was no need to. That, you know, it wasn't a big drama. You know what I mean? It's, you know, okay, yeah, you get captured, but you know, just get on with it, like, you know. So nothing, you know. And then as soon as Billy then mentioned it on Who Dares Wins, there's quite a few people from B Squadron who were in Bosnia at the time. Were ringing him up and saying, "Billy, you've never been captured. That's a bit of a bullshit sort of story, you know." And well, actually, we have. We just didn't make a song and dance about it. And I've got 3 boys in the military, and I actually recounted the story to them, and they said, "Flipping hell, Dad, you know, that is a big issue, if that makes sense." But I just come from a sort of background and an era where you just got on with it. You know, like I say, I've just come back from nearly 2 years undercover with long hair in Northern Ireland, doing some real bad stuff over there, some ballsy stuff as well, and ultimately, you know, getting captured and get a bit of a hard time. Just get on with it. You know what I mean?
And in those moments, what was going through your mind? Were you ever worrying the worst could happen here?
No, never, not once. And I'm married with 4 kids, and not once did it actually cross my mind that we were in deep mire here. Because ultimately, you've just got to think. You've always got to keep on that positive note. Why would they kill us? You know, our ID cards tell us that we're UN. What they were trying to get out of us, because they knew that we were not normal UN, was that we were SAS, because the SAS had a bad reputation for the Serbs. Because I don't know if you remember an incident in Srebrenica, when Srebrenica was being overrun by, and the UN were not really effective, to be quite frank. But we had a 4-man SAS team in there, and they were bringing in aircraft onto Serbian positions, if I may, and it was being broadcast by the BBC. Thank BBC. If that makes sense. You know, the SAS were in town, like, you know. So it's and every time we had a meeting with General Dodakovic, we would walk in there, and it was just full of Serbian Muslim officers, and he would laugh and go, "Ha ha ha, SAS is in town," because we had you know, we were there unofficially as Joint Commission observers, part of the UN, but you know, most people knew that, yeah, SAS. And the reason being is we didn't look and dress and act like normal UN, because, like I say, you've got a job to do, and wearing that UN crap stopped you doing that job. And I'll give you an example. So there were 6 armored warrior vehicles, all in a line, big UN written all over them, so white UN, blah blah blah. Were manned actually by this light infantry unit, and they'd been at this checkpoint 3 days, and they were there really to have a look up a track, which was in Muslim hands, because there'd been reports of an atrocity at the top of the track. And so me again, me and Billy turned up in a crappy old, British Land Rover. Jumped out, and the track was being guarded by two fairly oldish Muslims with again AK-47 variant, the Yugoslav version. They had two oil cans, oil drums, and they had a big lump of wood over the top, and that was their checkpoint. So me and Billy got up there. We were sort of, what the hell was going on here? Spoke to the sergeant. So there was an officer in charge. We had a chat with the sergeant because they know a bit more, and we're also going to get the truth rather than talking with an officer. So we had a chat with the sergeant. He said, "Listen, we've been here 3 days, and the two Muslim guards there, they saying that we're not allowed up there. UN blah blah blah." And me and Billy looked at each other and went, "What the hell?" So we walked over, kicked the oil drums aside, threatened the two, because they all got. So we just threatened them. They sat back down, and we said, "Listen, guys, just follow us." And we got in our crappy Land Rover, SAS, lots of money, crappy Land Rover. Drove up this, and the 6 warrior vehicles followed us up, and as it transpired, there was 12 Serbian military guys had been murdered, basically executed, and so the point being, there was bad on all sides, if that makes sense. And Bosnia was a classic example. So you had the Muslims, you had the Croats, you had the Serbs. Serbs, obviously, obviously a lot more bad, I think, because they were a bigger organisation, much more well trained, much better military hardware. But the Muslims and the Croats, they're just as bad as each other. And the thing about the British don't like anyone. So while you're over there, the French, for instance, were very pro-Serbian, same as the Russians. The Germans were very pro-Croat. The Brits didn't like anyone, so so if you was a bad guy, you were going to get dealt with, if that makes sense. And that really is a testament to the British mentality. You're there, you're not going to take sides. You're there to do a job, and I just got on with it. So yeah, it was quite an interesting. It was a really testing 6 months, to be honest. And the way they did it was the squadrons, SAS squadrons, would rotate. They'd do a 6 month tour, and then the next squadron would just take over. And we did that for about 3 years, I think it was, during the some of the bad parts, the bad times. And then when the ceasefire kicked in, because we were there actually when it became, it went from UN, and then overnight, your white vehicle, you just quickly threw a bit of green and black paint over it. And then, all your blue things that we never had anyway, that we got rid of. You were then, back to NATO, totally different. And because the mandate changes, UN, unfortunately, you can actually, you're not allowed to fire unless someone's actually firing at you. But if there's genocide going on directly in front of you, you're not allowed to intervene. And that's a problem with the UN. Whereas we would get stuck in and sort it out, because we just didn't follow the UN mandate. And like I say, that was done for a reason. The general down in Sarajevo needed certain individuals, 4-man teams, to actually get the intelligence back of what's actually going on the ground. And you can't do that dressed in UN and following a UN mandate. So black sheep, for want of another word, just getting on with it, had a lot of knockbacks, obviously, for doing it that way, but very effective. So yeah, it was good.
And people listening to this now, they may be wondering about working with Billy. Now, we've had Billy Billingham on the show, and I'm curious, obviously you've just told us an incredible story there, but what was it personally like for you to work closely with Billy, and how would you best describe him as a man?
He's a cracking guy, to be honest, a character. Billy actually joined the squadron about 3 years after me. if that makes and bear in mind that Mountain Troop B Squadron. So Billy and a lad called Davy Penman joined us, and Davy was X3 para. Billy was 2 para. So it was unusual for Mountain Troop, especially because we were full of commando, or we had 1 para, full of commandos, a couple of RAF regiment, and a tanky. So very sort of diverse group of people, really, which is great. And then all of a sudden we got Billy and Davey Penman turned up, that parachute regiment mentality, cracking blokes, really, really good blokes. And Billy I think he was a corporal who was in charge of 2 paras boxing team. So came to us, and obviously you lose all your rank. You start back at, you're now in charge of the tea and on the Rangers, and make sure you bring the sugar. So you lose all that rank, which is great because everybody goes through that level anyway. But it was not long after that, about a year later, because I then got posted to London with MI5. So I didn't really have. So I'd literally spent about a year, I think, with Billy in the squadron. And then I was off doing my bit. So then Billy was, doing his bit. So it's surprising that you've got 2 people. You can have 2 people serving in the same squadron, not so much in the same troop. One might be an air troop, one might be in mobility boat troop or whatever. But off they go. And you actually only work with people for a couple of years, maybe. Because you just don't. And if they're not in the same squadron, because the amount of people that say, Mick, do you know blah, blah, blah? He used to be in 22 SAS, and you're like that. No, never heard of him. And it's not because he's probably telling pork pies. It's because he's in a different squadron, and you just never see these people. If they're on selection with you, so there was 12 past my selection. So I knew all 12 people. So 4 of us went to B Squadron, and 4 went to or 3, I think, went to the different other squadrons or whatever. So I know them. People that you did courses with. So I did a motorbike course. I did my medics course, sniper course, all this type of stuff. So you actually bump into these people, but you don't actually work with them, if that makes sense. And the regiment are full of mysterious people that you've never heard of. But that's just part and parcel of the job. It's just the nature of the beast, really. You just get on and just crack on, But Billy was he was a fantastic lad to work with, and the potential was there. So I really saw him as a youngster until he got to about corporal, the corporal level, and then I was off doing a thing and never to return, if that makes sense. And then when I did return, it was just to say goodbye to everyone because my 22 years was finished. And sort of met. So I bump into Billy quite often when I got out and he was doing it. So yeah, not a bad word for Billy at all, because he epitomises everything that's good about C2 SES, if that makes sense. And he was a great asset to B Squadron Mountain Troop and B Squadron altogether, if that makes sense.
I love it. I love it. And I'd love to perhaps switch gears here because, of course, many people, they may know or they may not know, but of course, you were awarded a Queen's Commendation for bravery. I'm curious what you can tell us about, of course, how this came about and, of course, the kind of landscape that you found yourself in back then, those situations.
Yeah, it's quite a few people actually get awards over in Northern Ireland. Basically, I volunteered to do the undercover stuff. So when I was a young lad, I deployed to Northern Ireland in my commando days, and we were in South Armagh, and I really enjoyed soldiering in Northern Ireland. Although Green Army, as we call it, soldiering, normal army, is totally different to undercover stuff and SAS. So I've been on, and this played on my mind. So when I joined the regiment, we did a couple of deployments. So when you're on the anti-terrorist team, for instance, there's 10 of you get trained up and you're the quick response really. So if there's an incident that occurs over in Northern Ireland, you get flown over to Northern Ireland to assist the troop, because we've always got a troop of lads over in Northern Ireland, dealing with the bad people, if that makes sense. And you're there really to back them up. So we did a couple of these, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was a good crack. So I volunteered to do the 14 int, as they call it, the deck course, as it was then. And what the regiment like to do is they like to put one person per squadron, so 4 people on every deck course. And the reason being is that it's a really good skill to, learning surveillance, close target recce, close quarter battle, pistol shooting. Because although the regiment's very good at pistol work, when they do the anti-terrorism type stuff, the debt pistol work is much more advanced, because your pistol is your primary weapon. Whereas on the anti-terrorist team, your MP5 small machine gun is your primary weapon, and your pistol is your secondary weapon. So when it now becomes your primary weapon, your skill level goes quite high, if that makes sense. So with regiment guys, we tend to be pretty crap, I suppose, at surveillance, because we're very robocop-ish, as soon as you lock onto a target, they're not getting away. You just got that mentality, and you're pushing women and kids out the way. It's supposed to be covert, So we're not the best of surveillance, purely because of your attitude. You've got quite a robust attitude, I suppose. And bear in mind, you're dealing with people that volunteer to do this. So normal debt people are, they come from all parts of the British military. Submariners, for instance, seem to be quite good at surveillance. I don't know where they practice that on a submarine, but they are. So there was a couple of submariners in the deck when I deployed, if that makes sense. RAF regiment people, for instance, females. So it takes all sorts. So you've got these regiment guys mixed in with everyone else. They do stand out a little bit because the mentality is slightly different. Just get on with it. And so we volunteer, and like I say, not everybody. So if you're going to fail, it's going to be surveillance. That's what you're going to fail, because close target recce, breaking into houses covertly, is your bread and butter. That's what the regiment do good. Same as CQB, close quarter battle, pistol work. That is your bread and butter. So if you fail then too, that's to be honest, that's a bad thing to take back to the regiment, So you do put yourself on a bit of a pedestal to be knocked off. So before I went on the course, I got dragged in really. Listen, mate, whatever, by a guy who'd done the deck course, and he said, "Listen, mate, while you're on the course, just shut your mouth and just get on with it. It's their toy. They don't make a big drama out of it. Just play the game." So I went on there with the perfect attitude. I was the perfect student, yes. Even though you knew that a lot of it was absolute shite. I'll do that. Because ultimately, you didn't want to rock the boat, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Now, at the very end of the course, to be honest, I thought I'd failed miserably. Because every time we used to do surveillance stuff, we used to bring the target. So the person that you're following is the perfect person to talk about how we were, So they would bring the target in, and they would say, right, what did you see? Oh, right, yeah. First person, Mick. So when you got out your car, I saw this, and 2 minutes later, Mick, and Mick, and I'm looking around thinking, hold on, am I the only one on the course here? And this went on constantly, and I just thought, flipping hell, I'm about to fail. So at the very end of the course, they said, yeah, Mick, yeah, passed. And anyway, when I picked myself up in shock, I got dragged in and had a chat with the training major. And he said, well, how do you feel then, mate? You know, and I said, well, to be quite frank, I actually thought I'd failed the course. He said, well, why? I said, well, you were in them briefs. You know, it was make this, make that. He went, ah. He said, that's because you're keen. You're super keen to get stuck in. And I went, oh, yeah, okay then. Yeah, fair dues. And some of that he said thereafter always stuck with me. He said, there's some, bear in mind that the course is actually in Herefordshire, in Hereford, so a camp just outside Hereford. And something stuck with me. He said, Mick, you were really keen. Now, when you go to places like Northern Ireland or Londonderry, for instance, or South Omagh, you're keen that you can rein your keenness in because you're now in bad areas, if that makes sense. There's people on this course now who never got stuck in, so you expect them to do the same over in Northern Ireland. It's never going to work, if that makes sense. And I tell you what, he was absolutely spot on, because the people that you went through the course with that were sort of always on the fringes, you know, out of sight, out of mind, good at what they're doing, good surveillance, but didn't actually get stuck in, if that, you know, when it really mattered. It was true. Unfortunately, I never reined it in, and so I got, we call it being blown. So I got noticed quite a lot. So I ended up in a helicopter quite often, because when you get blown, what you have to do, you've got to change your appearance. Because if you don't, if you don't admit to the fact that I think I might have been blown here, you can actually get someone else killed, because you might have been in a location, so the location itself has been blown. But if you don't own up to the fact that when you go back and have a debrief and say, listen, while I was parked there, you know, a couple of people came out and they were giving me a funny look. Now, some people, you know, they were Mr. Perfect. You know, aren't I really good at surveillance because nobody ever notices me? But at the end of the tour, you look at them and think, yeah, but actually, what did you actually achieve out of the whole, you know? So you need people like me, I suppose, and people of my ilk, to get blown all the time and get stuck in, and do this, that, and the other. Purely because, you know, there's some dirty bits that need doing, when you're doing, you know, knocking on terrorist people's doors, for instance, just to make sure that they're in or not, which is not the norm. But you know, sometimes you need to do it, like, you know. So the QCB came about through a couple of things that had gone on. And because I was one of them people that was always, you know, getting stuck in, and there was one incident really where we stopped the IRA from blowing up a RUC station on two occasions. Really, one was one they were going to blow it from a house, and I was in a quite a difficult location. For about 36 hours, really. You know, not in a location that you can eat, sleep. You have to defecate yourself where you are, because it was the only place that we could get somebody in there to get eyes on the target, like, you know. And it was just one of them bomber things. But you know, someone's got to do it, if that makes sense. And you know, away you went, like, you know. So that, and then the other one was they actually drove a vehicle that had mortars, so they took the back window. So it was a saloon vehicle. They took the back window out, covered it with plastic, but they had mortars, 4 mortars, sort of laid in the vehicle, and they were in a lot of mortars over the. Thankfully, we as I turned the corner, they'd parked the car and they were doing their runner. Just we got there. So as you do, because they were there, we didn't know if it was going to be remote controlled or whatever, but because it was plastic and you could see all the wires. So again, it wasn't a big issue, but all you do is you just put your hand in and just drag a load of wires out, like, you know, and away it goes. And thankfully, it never went off, like, you know, but at least you know that, you know, you've damaged it, and it's not going to, because the thing that was going through my mind is that, you know, they're doing a runner, so somebody else was dealing with that, but they're unlikely to fire this off while they're in the area. But they're good, and if it's on a timer, they're going to time it so that they're going to be way out the area. So for me, it was to just rip out some wires wasn't a big drama, if that makes sense. It was a calculated decision, and you just go with it. So a couple of things. Don't get me wrong. There's quite a few people do some ballsy stuff out there because it's the nature of the job. Again, it's not like being in the British Army. I got stopped. I was doing a walk fast in a place called the Ardoyne, which is a staunch Republican estate in North Belfast. And the IRA were putting a mortar together, a mortar tube, but they were doing it in a house. But we didn't know, and it was in the back garden. So we knew that they were doing it, but we just didn't know the exact number of a house. And they said, listen, we need someone to do so. Because they said they need to do a walk past, I was sprinting. Yeah, I've got it. Yeah, Mick's got it. So did the walk past, and the British Army were told, stay out of the estate because we don't want to spook the IRA. And also we're operating. And bear in mind, I had really long blonde hair, a big gold earring. I looked like flipping Popeye, I suppose. Going down, I looked like a drug smuggler, to be quite frank. Tight old jeans on and just get on with it. Anyway, so I was doing the walk past, and I'd literally, you could hear the IRA foot in there talking. So you're doing a normal walk past, because if they come out and you're sort of stood there then you've blown the job. So you've just got to do the walk past as you would normally do, and then say yeah, and get the number of the garden, and then just carry on. Now, just after I've got the number where these people were putting this mortar together, a British Army patrol came down the opposite end, and the Ardoyne is a bit like Coronation Street, but lots of them, these back gardens and alleyways, anyway. So there's nowhere to go, and you've got to carry on walking. Again, it's that third party awareness. Once you make the decision to walk, you've got to continue with it. Unless you do something like weeing on the side of the street, or and then stagger back or whatever, and just make up some sort of ad lib, whatever. But I carried on, and the British Army, they threw me against the wall, because they must have thought, bingo, we've got something strange here. But they thankfully, we used to carry our driving licenses, and inside the driving license was a little note, and it said, listen, I'm in the British Army, I've got a weapon on me, treat me like you would do normal people, if that makes sense. And it was he must have been about 18, 19, something like that. Anyway, so I obviously passed the driving license to him quickly, because as soon as he'd felt, he would have felt my magazines first, because the pistol was down my front of my pants. He would have felt the magazines, and you don't know what the reaction is going to be thereafter. So I had to get the driving license to him. He read it, never said a word, gave me it back, gave me a bit of a hard time, the little shite, pushed me about or whatever. Didn't make a big drama out of it, and then sent me on the way. So we didn't blow the operation. Fantastic. So about 3 days later, I was in a place called Girdwood Barracks, which is actually where this British Army patrol were based at. And I was up there having a coffee, and this young lad came walking over. And I went, flipping hell, mate, you're that young lad. And he went, yeah. He said, I tell you what, he said, you're really brave. And I went, not really. I said, the IRA haven't got a clue who I am, but they know exactly who you are. So I said, it's you people really that are the brave ones, because you're full on, they know exactly who you are, and he, it just gave him a bit more confidence as well, knowing that, they're doing a job. And I did manage to get hold of his sergeant major, found out who his sergeant major was, and said, listen, you need to give him a pat on the head. I said, because he could quite easily have blown that whole operation. But at the age of 18, 19, as soon as he read my thing, he treated me, gave me a bit of a hard time, I suppose, which you expect, but sent me on the way. So didn't blow the operation at all, so good on him,
Was Northern Ireland and the work in which you did there, was that the home of the most dangerous missions that you ever went on in your career?
No, I not so much dangerous, but ballsy. Yeah, I would say that. No, at no stage did I feel, intimidated. Reason being, you had your get out of jail card in your thing. You probably remember the incident where two young signals lads got snatched out of their car in the Anderson Town Road. It's funny because a few years later, my vehicle broke down not that far from where their vehicle got snatched. And I jumped out the vehicle and got two Catholic lads to come and help me push the vehicle. And they were great. If only they knew what was in that. But it just goes to show, 90% of the Catholic population have got no interest really in the violent side of it, and they're doing the undercover stuff. Taught me quite a big lesson, really, that the Northern Irish people in general, Catholic and Protestant, were really nice people. It's one of the most friendly countries I've ever been to. Belfast, for a few drinks of beer in a pub is just something to behold. Really, really friendly people. So yeah, it's a bit bizarre. So my car broke down. There's me with an English accent because I certainly was never going to try and speak with a Northern Irish accent, because all you're going to, some guy's going to look at you and go, "Oh, you're not from here." So I just all right, mate, yeah, normal lingo. And they kindly pushed the vehicle off the main road and down a side alleyway, if that makes sense, and thanked them. And thankfully, someone came along and managed to fix the car for me, so we could drive out of there. But it was deemed as quite a hostile area. But just get on with it, if you start panicking and start getting a bit worried about an area, you're going to blow yourself. And that's the same as, so when you're out doing operations, because you're always on your own, because if there's two of you, it just looks a bit suspicious. Two blokes, dodgy. One bloke, you can get away with it. So when you're working in these really hard estates, I had a bit of a philosophy, I suppose, that when I'm doing something, bear in mind that when the IRA are up to something, they have a lot of dickers out. They call them dickers. And they're young lads, young scroats, really, often coming sort of potential IRA recruits who are sat on street corners just acting a pain in the arse, but being the eyes and ears of the IRA. So you come along, bimbling along as you do, hoping to see something or listen and blah, blah, blah. You attract attention of these dickers, if that makes sense. So my philosophy, and I swore by it, that if they confronted me, I would turn it on its head and confront them. So if I could see them, 4 or 5 of them, talking, and because you knew any minute now they're going to confront you, I used to just cross the road before they even thought about it, and then walked up to them. And to be honest, it worked great because it put them on the back foot. Because if you don't, what will happen is if you scurry past, scared, why you have to be scared when you've got a flipping shooter in your pocket, I don't know. But people do get a bit nervous, if that makes sense. And if you go past and you look nervous and you sort of start twitching, and all you're going to do, you're going to confirm their suspicions, if that makes sense. That you're a dodgy guy, you shouldn't be in the area, and you could actually blow the whole job. So yeah, again, different mentality. Just get on with it,
And how did your work done with the SAS, how did that work compare to what you did with MI5, which is James Bond stuff? How did that compare?
Yeah, it's quite robust in its attitude. SAS selections is done for a reason, because they want a certain individual. So all the jobs that you do, I can't believe I said do, but all the jobs that you do, are all sort of based on getting the job done, if that makes sense. When you're working with organisations like MI5, slightly different mentality. And again, you have to rein yourself in. So when you go down there, 2 years over in Northern Ireland doing what we do surveillance-wise in Northern Ireland is totally different to 2 years working with MI5, again, doing surveillance. Because you're working with civilians. They don't have that mindset of getting stuck in, if that makes sense. So I love the attitude of the SES for getting the jobs done. People always say to me, who's the best special forces unit in the world, and it always comes up. And not being biased in any way at all, but it's the SES and the SPS because they're two of a kind, if that makes sense.
And why is that? Sorry, Mick. Why are the SAS and SBS? Why are they the best in the world?
Because of the diversity of the job. Delta Force, I class, or we class, Delta Force as being the top-notch tier 1 organisation over in America. SEAL teams, no, forget that. Because SEAL teams they're matlows, they're Navy guys, first and foremost. They then do a nice sexy course. They're sort of Gucci course that they do, buds or whatever it's called. But deep down, they're still matlows. You know what I mean? And when you get into a major firefight, it's your pre-skills, your pre-knowledge in the military that generally gets you out of it. Your skills that you've learned as an SAS soldier will help. But if you're first and foremost a military grunt, commando forces, parachute regiment, or whatever, that's going to come to the fore, and that's what gets you out of trouble. That SEAL team, the SEAL teams specifically, are matlows, and then they come along. And actually, some of these people, they do their basic training, and they go straight on to buds. So they've got no sort of military background and to fall back on, I suppose. Whereas Delta Force is totally different. Delta Force are exactly the same as the British SAS. They're Rangers, they're Green Berets, paratroopers. They're hardcore, soldiers first and foremost before they go off and do the sexy bit of wearing black kit and looking good and all that sort of stuff. So we treat Delta Force as our equal. But when you look at the two organisations, just the diversity of the SAS in roles. So just an example, you can do 6 months on the anti-terrorist thing, the sexy bit, looking good. Doing that for 6 months. Come off that, you can then go over to Northern Ireland. So growing your hair long, undercover stuff for Northern Ireland. Come back, chop your hair off. You now go to Bosnia, and being normal Green Army, Bosnia. Come straight from that, you're now working with MI5. So the diversity, and you can get any SAS soldier without a shadow of doubt. You can pick him up and you can stick him into any environment in the world, and they'll make it work. They've just got the ability, the hardship and background, really, I suppose, to make it work. So that's why I think SAS slowly follow, just a little bit behind Delta Force, because you go over. Delta Force, for instance, don't do anti-terrorism, whereas we do for 6 months. Not that we do a lot of it now. The police have taken the role over as such. But they can be quite jealous, really, I suppose, of the roles that the SAS carry out.
Did you ever do any training with Delta Force? And I wonder if you did. What was the reception for you guys like with them?
Well, we got sent over there. It was a winter, and they wanted to learn a bit about Arctic warfare, and coming from mountain troop. So three of us went out there. There was 2 D Squadron lads and myself went out there, joined B Squadron of Delta Force, and we were expecting to fly to Norway, because if you're going to learn Arctic warfare, go to Norway, in the Arctic. Anyway, they flew us to Wyoming. Flew to Wyoming and Jackson Hole. Coldest it got was about -1. We did a few things. Yeah, it wasn't best. To be honest, at the end of it, we said, "Listen, don't bother." um, if you're going to learn Arctic, well, go to the Arctic and learn it. Which is a bit like what the SAS do. We bring in professionals. Stig will come in and teach us how to drive because he's the best of the. When I was running the CQB cell, close quarter battle pistols, we used to bring in a guy called Bob Dunkley, who was top notch pistol shot, and he would come in to teach us how to in between courses, just to keep our skill levels high. Um, Mountain troop, we used to go to Switzerland and get German guides or Swiss guides or French guides to teach us how to climb, to ski. It's about getting the best people. The SAS go to America, for instance, and get the Americans to teach us how to parachute. And the reason being is that they're in sunshine all the time. San Diego, it is hot. If we rely on the Royal Air Force, for instance, you never get any jumps in because the weather's crap. So you sat most of the time in an RAF camp, Price Norton, and waiting for the weather to get nice. So yeah, it's the regiment have got a clever mentality. Med courses, for instance. When I did the med course, you do a thing called Advanced Trauma Life Support, which is a long weekend, and they bring the top professors from all around the country to humbly teach us SAS guys real down to earth medical training that's going to keep people alive. You know what I mean? So a bit like what they teach doctors, but in a very easy, simplistic way, if that makes so that we understand it more. And actually, it's really, really humbling. Sat in the presence of like Professor blah blah from Birmingham Hospital, bringing it down to our level so that we understood, brain injuries and how to treat this, that, and the other. And it was just fantastic. And to be honest, that's how it should be. Don't rely on yourselves trying to teach yourselves because you never get any better. Go and find out who are the best. Who are the best climbers? Right, teach mountain troop. Who are the best? People with boats. And teach boat troop like or the drivers. Go and get the stick. So, he'll come down and we actually use the police fast driving courses. Why? Because they're the best at what they do. So why wouldn't you use a police light? If that makes sense. So yeah, it's very clever how they do it.
Mick, I've loved this, and I'd love to ask you if I may. I'd love to switch gears now and ask you perhaps about some of your more recent security work, which I know since you've kind of wrapped up your time within the military now, you've kind of transitioned more into security work. And I guess one question that I had, and when I was chatting to people that listen to this show, when you're doing security work, what is it, these subtle cues that you're looking for? And you've described some situations today. How can the person listening to this now evaluate whether a threat is present or whether someone may be looking to perhaps cause them some harm?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're living in a society at the moment where about 90 odd % of the UK population have got no awareness about them, and you see that very evident. I can go to any major city in the UK, strip off naked outside of wherever, and before the police have turned up to arrest me, which will probably be about an hour, somebody will have bumped into me. Why? Mobile phone, or the heads down. They'll walk into someone, and unfortunately, that's just the society we're in at the moment. So we've found it quite hard. So I came back. So I did what 22 years in corporate security, the last 15 really, with a company called SBM Offshore as head of security worldwide. And we never had a single security incident worldwide operating in some high-risk areas: Nigeria, Angola, Guyana, Brazil, some dodgy locations, Iraq. Zero security incidents recorded against our people. And the reason being is, when I first joined the organisation, I had a blank canvas, and it was all about getting the staff to have, learn a security culture. And what I mean by that, which is sadly lacking in the UK, it means that your staff are actually helping you or helping the organisation be aware of what the threats are, if that makes sense, and just making them a bit more robust in their mindset. So, a lot of people, because we're talking civilians now, so when we send civilians to places like Nigeria, which can be flipping dodgy, to be quite frank, if they don't feel comfy, they're not going to go. Same as trying to bring a vessel. You try and bring in a vessel, because when you're on a vessel, you're a bit isolated. Especially the divers. Some of the divers and the crews, they get paid a lot of money. They don't like to be in an area where there's a good chance of piracy or terrorist attack by militants in Nigerian waters. So you have to get regain their confidence in the first place, and just make sure you do your due diligence and everything else. But over here in the UK at the moment, we are transiting through a sort of dangerous times, I would say. And even more so, we've now got Martin's Law that's come out. Martin's Law is going to be a total waste of time because we're in a security industry that have got really, really poor standards. And there's an organisation called the SIA, the Security Institute Association, SIA, who, when they took over the industry, they came in with a good idea, which was to actually regulate the security industry, so that they knew who had a license. So at the time, I would say about 90% of the security industry at the time were ex-military or ex-police, because it's the natural progression from leaving the military or the police.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's vice versa. It's 80 to 90% are civilians, especially in, door supervisor, guarding this, that, and the other, looking after hotels and stuff like that. It's very predominantly a civilian environment. And the reason why the standards are so low is because anybody, and I mean anybody, can get a security license, an SIA license. Even people that can't speak the language can get a license, and that's what we've been battling with for quite a few years now. So I came back to the UK really in 2022 to set up a little company, me and my daughter, called Hawkes Co, teaching personal safety, situational awareness. And then my daughter, she actually does all the physical breakaway stuff and the restraint training. Because again, we don't follow SIA rules, a bit like the UN follow that, because it's very restrictive. It's all about not harming the individual. Hold on, this guy's trying to harm an individual, so we teach the other way. I don't care if I'm going to hurt you, mate. There was an incident reported the other day about a guy who'd committed a sexual offence against a young female, but the two security guys that got hold of him, they had to let him go because they got a report of a major disturbance that was happening, and people were getting battered. So they just thought, yes, this is a predator, but there's nothing we can do about it. So I jumped in there and said, listen, why didn't you just snap his ankles? Stand on his ankles, snap his ankle. And then, because the police turned up about half an hour later, and, shock horror, he's gone. If he's got broken ankles, he's still going to be there. And so that's the mindset that we have, and it's actually is required nowadays, because with the world is getting more dangerous. Make no bones about that. On the streets, for instance, knives, everything else. So the society is, but all of a sudden we've been taken. So not only this government, but many, successive governments, I suppose, have been watering down the police force. And you can't call them a police force anymore. It's just the police. They'll turn up and they won't investigate or whatever. But it's because that all their powers have been drained out of them by politicians. You've got security guards looking and filming people stealing stuff because they're not allowed to do anything about it. Where's the old, that baton that you could smack somebody over the head with, so that and let that be a lesson to you. They're not going to come in and steal from that store again once you put a baton over the top of the head, but that all that's been taken off them because it's all geared to not harming the bad people. So we're living in a society which is very much pays to be a criminal, to be quite frank. If you steal less than £200, you're going to get away with it. Now, you can do that every day. £199 worth of shopping, walking out. It's just, it's gone mad, absolutely mad. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to quick reset. Let's go back to the Sweeney days, and with our mentality, and do it and having a young girl teach people how to break away, because it's all about keeping out of trouble. There's organisations out there that teach people how to do self-defence and that lot. Not a big fan, to be honest, because most people, when you get taught self-defence, you're taught in a gymnasium, sterile gymnasium. You know who you're up against. That's different on the street, if that makes sense. So for us, it's all about using your brain, because everybody can do situational awareness. Only a certain amount of individuals can do self-defence, and if you're a nice guy, no matter what colour belt you've got, black belt, whatever, if you're a nice person, you are not going to snap someone's arm or tread on someone's throat in the streets, if that makes sense. So, yeah, it's trying to keep common sense about it, a bit of realism into, and it's the same as when we teach active shooter training as such, or knife rampage, which is exactly the same thing, the same aim. Over here they do run, hide, tell. Whereas we teach, and I've been teaching this really all around the world since 2015, after the Paris attacks. We teach the same as Americans: run, hide, fight. And the reason we teach it, the reason why tell is taught over here, it's because it's predominantly from the police, and then the police are going to come and rescue you. Well, if that's your plan, call me old-fashioned, but it's a crappy plan. So, do something positive. So what we do is we tell people what the options are. Now, if you're a bad person with a knife, or you've got a weapon, or you're a suicider, so you've got a suicide vest, the only way you can stop that is to cease the brain from operating, and picking up a nice heavy object like a fire extinguisher is the perfect weapon to stop that brain from functioning, if that makes sense. Now, I'm not saying that everybody is going to, everyone's going to pick up a, because you never know how you're going to react when you're being shot at. Someone's running at you with a knife. You're never going to know how you're going to react on the day until it actually happens, if that makes sense. But you have to tell people that this is your option, because ultimately, if you do nothing, you're going to end up as a statistic 6 feet under the ground, pushing up daisies for the rest of eternity. So people need to know the bad side of it, and what you can do if all else fails, if that makes sense. And by airbrushing that and not teaching that, I think he's wrong, because people need to know. So forget the tell. Tell get on your mobile phone. You know what it's like. People get on a mobile phone, and all of a sudden they haven't got a clue what's going on around them. So we never teach that. So we go the opposite way. Run if you can. Obviously, get out of the building if you can. Hide if you can't. Get somewhere nice and quiet that you can hide. And we generally say, listen, get in the toilets, men's and women's toilets, because they're inward open doors. And if you've got a heavy duty chock or door stop, you can bang that under the door. And as long as someone's laid on the floor with their foot against the door chock, no one's going to come in the door. And the reason we lay them down is if you're an active shooter, you may fire through the door. But people tend to fire through doors, not down the way. So if you're laid on the floor, you're generally going to be safe. But again, it takes a bit of guts for people to do that, But again, people need to know these options because we are living in dodgy times really. And we saw in Stockport with the three girls that got killed with the guy with the knife. Saw it in Wales with the schoolgirl that was intent on stabbing people. I think she did stab teacher and someone else or whatever.
Yeah.
These people have to be dealt with in a robust manner. As soon as you pick up a knife at 14 years of age, you are no longer a child. You are an individual that can kill an individual. So the way I'm going to deal with you as if you're a 6-foot bloke, I'm going to absolutely take you out of the game, if that makes sense. Because if you have that mentality of, you're in the wrong game. If that makes sense, and people need to know what the options are. We saw it on someone put a thing on a plane, a post on about a plane, and it was an Arab guy, and he stood up and he started shouting Allah Akbar and all that. Now, people like me, when we hear that, instantly you think, suicider, pick up something, and you absolutely destroy his brain, So jumping up and shouting Allah Akbar is a very dangerous game to play, unless you're intent on blowing yourself up, because people of my ilk and that way are pretty robust in our attitude, really, and are likely to preempt what's going to happen, So what we're trying to get across really to people is don't rely on the police. Don't rely on the security thing. Rely on yourself. So situational awareness. Get yourself, because situational awareness is not something that you learn in a book. I can explain it to you. It's something that you have to actually go out and do, and constantly do it, so that it becomes second nature. So that before you step out of your studio or your house, you're looking left and right to see what's on the street. You're looking 100 meters down the road on the path to see what's happening way ahead of you. Because people nowadays, we just tend to look at the floor. So you're only looking about 10 feet in front of you. Well, that's too late, to be honest. You need to just open your vision up and take your earbuds out, because your two senses the two main senses are what's going to keep you safe. And as soon as you put earbuds in and you start looking at your mobile phone, you're completely blind to what's going to happen, if that makes sense. And that's why I was trying to get into the farm industry as well. Unfortunately, with the farm industry, there is zero security culture. I know I can go on any farm and take a vehicle that will have the keys in the ignition, any farm, because it's their nature. They just park up, be it a tractor, be it a combine harvester, or their own personal vehicles. Keys will be in the ignition. We know that. Criminals know that. So you need to change that. And a lot of the farmers, especially the older farmers, they're very set in their ways, don't really want to change anything. So the way into it really is get hold of the youngsters. So us getting into the colleges and universities to establish a security culture, so that when these youngsters, take up a position at a farm, at least they're now thinking security, if that makes sense. Because the other bad thing about the So you've got a thing called the Rural Crime Network, and they're full of ex-policemen or crime commissioners, so very police orientated. So they tend to support the police, but unfortunately, the police are very underfunded, very much undermanned. They're on the chin strap basically, covering massive areas. I live in rural Herefordshire, and since I've been back in 2022 May, I've seen one police car in the rural countryside. One in 3 years, or just over 3 years, and that just sums it up, because rural crime is not a priority to the police. In fact, any crime is not a priority to the police, but even more so rural crime. It tends to get brushed under the carpet. Police don't investigate anymore. So if a farmer reports something, it's normally because he wants the number so that he can claim off his insurance, because he knows full well that the police are not going to come out and do an investigation. And that's just the way the police are now. And again, I've got a lot of respect for the police on the ground, the police officer. I just detest what the police have become, and it's not because of them.
We're going to link below to your website where people can check out your security company. And I wonder, do you have perhaps any closing messages for our audience, or anywhere that people can go now to connect with you or to check your stuff out?
Yeah, so we're quite vocal on LinkedIn, if that makes sense. So Michael Charles Hawkes. I'm using my full name on that purely because I've been banned a few times. I tend to say it how it is. That tends to upset quite a few people. But we've actually got quite a few people on that. We're also on Facebook, but as Hawks and Co. So Michael Hawks. So I tend to use social media really for work and passing messages on and stuff like that. We're very predominant on LinkedIn, especially. So yeah, just and by all means, just click in and link in with us, and because we're happy, and we're happy just to pass on information. I've done 3 booklets about VIP protection, kidnap and ransom, which are actually really good documents ready for people who are breaking out into the security industry, because they're good reference documents. And the VIP one is 150 pages, but it's a lot of experience that we've drawn together, put it in there, because it's all about helping people, because we're all on the same side. We're all trying to defeat the bad people from doing their thing. Yes, we've got a slightly different mentality of how we should do it, and we stick with that. I have nothing to do with the SIA at all. Certainly, license. I've never had to get a license in my life, purely because I've always worked abroad in high risk environments. So coming back now to see how poorly, really, a military guy will leave the military having done 22 years in the military, and everything that he has learnt is completely thrown out the window by the SIA, because none of it is recognised. I did a 6-week bodyguard course, not recognised. I've done a 6-month surveillance course, not recognised. But you do a 3-week bodyguard course, you do a 3-week surveillance course, it's recognised. I do physical penetration testing. I break into places, and it's not to undermine the security or the company. It's really to show them how criminals look at, because security is always done from the inside out. Very rarely do you do it from the outside in, which is how criminals do it, if that makes sense. So, and the way we go about it is social networking. And 9 times out of 10, I'll be able to get into an establishment because of one of the staff has made a mistake, if that makes sense. So technology is great, but the human error factor is quite high. And it's because there's a lack of security culture. And that's what we change. So as part of our package we'll show you the flaws, and we'll show you, where your security is a bit defective. but we won't undermine the security. That's not what it's all about. Anyone could do that. It's having solutions ready, how to close that gap, and do it nicely. And generally, it's by establishing a security culture with all the people that work in there. If you can get them things, because each individual that's walking around is a potential CCTV system, mobile. They just need to be taught what to look for and report, if that makes sense. And that's security culture. So yeah, for us, staying safe, staying healthy, but ultimately just get on with it, because there is a lot of paranoia. And as we always say, be aware, just don't be paranoid.
I love it. I love it. Well, Mick, this was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Pleasure, mate. Absolute pleasure, mate.